Welcome to Immigration Quicktake. This is Ellie Rutledge Silver with the American Immigration and Lawyers Association. Yesterday, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, or USCIS, issued draft guidance on the extreme hardship standard and is providing the public an opportunity to comment. Here to discuss the guidance and what it could do is Betsy Lawrence, Director of Liaison at AILA. Betsy, thanks for joining me. What changes would this guidance bring if implemented?
Thanks, Ellie. So the first thing that I just want to point out is that this is a draft memo. At this point, we do not have final guidance, and in fact, we won't have final guidance until the comment period closes, which is November 23rd, and until USCIS has had time to review those comments and determine whether any changes will be made. So just bear that in mind that we're still in draft form at this time. But in terms of what the draft memorandum does do, it actually takes a lot of the sort of well-established principles and theories of extreme hardship that have been settled by the federal courts and by the Board of Immigration Appeals and have been in place for many years, and sort of expands on those principles and gives a lot of what appears to be a lot of good guidance to adjudicators on those standards. So for example, we see quite a bit of emphasis on the concept of aggregation. The memo talks about how extreme hardship factors should be considered in the aggregate, and also discusses the fact that extreme hardship to various qualifying relatives can be considered in the aggregate as well. There's one principle as well that was not included in the current standard operating procedures, but is included in the draft guidance, and it is something that we've pointed out to USCIS in our communications with them over the past few months, and that is the fact that extreme hardship to a non-qualifying relative can be considered as extreme hardship to a qualifying relative if it impacts that relative. So there is a statement in the draft guidance on that point, and we think that's an important one. So all of that is pretty well established, but what is new? Well, under the current standard operating procedures, an applicant is required to show extreme hardship in two scenarios. They must show that the qualifying relative will suffer extreme hardship if they remain in the United States, that is, they have to show extreme hardship due to separation, and they have to show extreme hardship if the qualifying relative were to depart the United States and join their loved one in the country abroad, also known as extreme hardship due to relocation. Under the draft guidance, the applicant can now show that they've met the extreme hardship standard by showing either relocation or separation. But there is a threshold criteria that they first have to demonstrate. So for example, if the applicant was going to show that their qualifying relative would suffer extreme hardship based on relocation, they first have to show that it's reasonably foreseeable that the qualifying relative would relocate abroad. Alternatively, if they're showing hardship based on separation, they have to show that it's reasonably foreseeable that the qualifying relative would remain in the United States, and then it is more likely than not that they would suffer extreme hardship based on separation. Also in the draft memo are a series of factors called special circumstances that would, quote, often weigh heavily in the finding of extreme hardship. Those factors are if the qualifying relative has been granted asylee or refugee status, if the U.S. government has made a formal disability determination for the qualifying relative or a member of his or her household, if the qualifying relative is on active military duty, if the Department of State has issued certain travel warnings for the applicant's home country, or if there would be substantial disruption to child care for the applicant and his or her family.
Thanks, Betsy. Does this draft guidance go far enough?
One of the disappointments in the memorandum is the lack of any presumption of extreme hardship. In his directive of November 20th, 2014, DHS Secretary Johnson had specifically instructed USCIS to consider circumstances where a presumption of hardship might be found. Though we have these so-called special circumstances, these fall short of a true presumption and unfortunately will not do much to ease the evidentiary burdens on applicants or result in more consistent adjudications for individuals who have particularly compelling circumstances. In addition, as is the case with all agency guidance, the true test will lie in two things. First, what the final agency guidance will ultimately look like, and second, how it will be implemented by adjudicators in the field. Over the last few years, we've observed a lot of inconsistencies in the implementation of the extreme hardship standard operating procedures and in decisions regarding extreme hardship, and we truly hope that this draft guidance is a first step in the right direction.
What should we expect next?
So USCIS is accepting comments on the draft guidance until November 23rd, and as usual, AILA will be submitting comments. After that, USCIS will review all of the comments submitted and will issue a final memorandum, which I believe will be in the form of the USCIS online policy manual. We're not quite sure what to expect in terms of timing, but as many of you know, there was recently a proposed rule to expand the provisional unlawful presence waiver program. That comment period on that proposed rule ended on September 21st. So it is hoped that this final guidance will be released to coincide perhaps with the release of the final provisional waiver expansion rule.
Thank you, Betsy, for joining me. For the rest of you, please stay tuned for more updates from the American Immigration Lawyers Association.